Hi, welcome to Math Time with Mrs. Depperschmidt. Today we'll continue multiplication, this time with two-digit numbers, and we'll start with a little mental warm-up here to get your brain going. Please remember that whenever it's necessary to stop the video, pause, work some examples so you're comfortable with the multiplication. And remember that you need to know your multiplication facts in order for this to really work out and for you to be good at it. I want to start with this warm-up where we start with one group of 35. It's probably really easy for you to calculate that answer. But then when you think about 10 groups of 35, as we move to the left on the place value chart, the answer changes just a bit. It grows by a lot. Same thing when we do this multiplication with 100 groups of 35. We're just moving to the left in the place value chart. And I'm sure you know that 100 groups of 35 are 3,500. When we move on to a little bit different number, where we're multiplying 35 times 2, now we need to do some more calculation. Go ahead and pause while you work that out. And you'll come to the answer that two groups of 35 are 70, not 75. Two groups of 35 are 70. Now when we go to the left on the place value chart with 20 groups of 35, that's even bigger because we've had to regroup into the hundreds column. Now we have 700. And once again, when we're working with the hundreds, 200 groups of 35, now we'll be moving into the thousands column. And your answer, your result, grows every time, sort of like this. One way to think about these bigger numbers is to take them apart into their sections, sort of like expanded form in addition, only this time with multiplication. You know that 200s are two groups of 100, and you need to multiply that whole thing by 35. Then you can work with that in any order you like, because multiplication of the associative property of multiplication. You can multiply in any order, and the result will always be the same. I like to think of 35 groups of 100 first, because my brain knows, oh, that's 3,500s, then multiply that by 2, and you'll find out that the answer is 7,000. That's why we're warming up a little bit with our multiplications. Here's the next one. Next we'll do this one, moving into some more complicated multiplication. I've calculated that 4 times 76 is 304. When we move to the left on the place value chart and say 40 groups of 76, we know that the 304 will still work out if we just imagine that it's 4, although now we're talking about that many tens. So now we have 304 tens, which is 3,040. Moving on to the hundreds, now I'm going to think about 4 groups of 100 and then multiply that by 76. Oh, I can do 4 groups of 76, which I know from our first calculation is 304, then multiply that whole thing by 100, or move it into the 100s realm, which gives us 30,400. It's amazing to watch how our numbers grow as we increase the place value of our multiplier. I'm also showing this on the place value chart as if we had regrouped while we did the calculations. There, that makes it a little bit easier to see. We started with 304 from our first calculation, but if we're going to do that to regroup are 304 hundreds, we'll think about this. We'll still have our 400s left in the hundreds column because they won't get regrouped. But we have 100 hundreds, another 100 hundreds, and still yet one more 100 hundreds. When we convert those to thousands with our blocks, we know that we have 10 thousands is the same as 100 hundreds. And then a 10,000 is one group of 10,000. So we are sort of sliding over, but each time it looks as if our zeros are dropping off. That's because we're changing the blocks and making groups of tens. And this explains the answer here, that why we have 30 thousands. 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. We have no thousands, and we have 400s left over after we've done all the regrouping. It's quite complicated with higher and higher numbers. Here's another example to look at. Without the place value chart, we can think that 100 groups of 16 is 16 hundreds. We know that hundreds always have two zeros on the end. I'll put the comma where it goes. But now look what we will do if we need 600 groups of 16. I'm going to break that 600 up into its parts. 6 times 100 is the same as 600, and then it's multiplied by 16. I think I'll do the 6 times 16 first, because that will make my calculation easier, and I've practiced with that kind of multiplication, and then I will multiply it by 100. And our result with 16 times 6 is 96. When we move that into the 100s, we have 96 hundreds, or 9,600. I've taken it apart like this, and I did 6 groups of 16 first, and then multiplied it by 100. If your brain gets comfortable with moving around in the taking numbers apart that way and going on, you'll be very successful with multiplying of bigger numbers. I know you're going to get good at this with practice, so don't give up, and please remember to be kind. I'll see you at school.